Remember how Pretty Woman looked like the perfect Hollywood dream? Turns out it was built on lies, manipulation, and heartbreak. One actor was rushed to the hospital, another's marriage fell apart after a love scene, and Julia Roberts broke down on set, begging to stop. Today, we're uncovering the shocking truths the studio tried to hide, and you won't believe the price the cast paid for fame. Fact 1. Pretty Woman. Almost ended in an alley. You think Pretty Woman was a feel-good Cinderella story? Think again. The movie that made Julia Roberts America's sweetheart was originally a horror show about heartbreak, drugs, and despair. Before Disney bought it, the script was called 3,000. That's the amount of money Edward pays Vivian for a week. But in this version, she wasn't the witty, lovable dream girl we know. She was addicted to cocaine, beaten down by life, and barely surviving. However, Edward doesn't sweep her off her feet. He throws her out of the car, tosses the cash at her, and drives off, leaving her crying in a filthy alley. Julia Roberts once said reading that version made her stomach turn. Disney executives almost passed out when they first saw it. It was uncomfortable and way too real. But director Gere saw something underneath the grime, a chance to turn tragedy into hope. So they tore the whole thing apart and rebuilt it from scratch. What used to be a brutal story about survival became the ultimate fantasy about transformation. Fact 2. Julia Roberts almost quit, and her one rule changed everything. Julia Roberts may have looked fearless on screen, but when filming began, she was terrified. She was just 22, young, unknown, and staring down one of the riskiest roles in Hollywood. Can you guess the first thing she told director Gere? "I won't be naked." That one line changed movie history. Julia didn't just protect herself, she protected Vivian. She hated how the script treated her. Cold, dirty, objectified. Julia fought to make Vivian human. Funny, smart, hopeful, someone you could root for. She begged for rewrites, pushed back against the studio, and refused to play the role as written. Because of her, Vivian became one of the most iconic women in cinema. That's why audiences didn't just fall in love with Vivian. They fell in love with Julia Roberts herself. If she hadn't said no that day, Pretty Woman might have been just another tragic movie no one wanted to rewatch. Fact 3. Richard Gere said no again and again until Julia flew to New York to save the movie. Richard Gere wanted nothing to do with Pretty Woman. He turned it down so many times the producers stopped asking. He thought Edward Lewis was boring, just another rich guy in a suit. But director Gere wouldn't give up. He knew Gere was the missing piece. So he did something crazy. He sent Julia Roberts to New York. She wasn't there to pitch the script or negotiate. She was there to connect. When she met Gere in his apartment, she didn't say a word about the role. She just smiled, grabbed a Post-it, wrote something, and slid it across the table. It said, "Please say yes." Gere looked at her, then at Marshall, and said, "I think I just said yes." That's how Edward and Vivian were born. Their chemistry was instant, almost electric. Julia's warmth melted Gere's reserve. Gere's calm grounded her nervous energy. Together, they turned a corporate transaction into one of the greatest love stories ever filmed. Fact 4. The jewelry box scene was a prank that changed movie history. Do you remember that moment when Richard Gere snaps the jewelry box shut and Julia Roberts bursts out laughing? It's the heartbeat of Pretty Woman. But guess what? That wasn't acting. It was a prank. Here's the real story. They were shooting the jewelry scene late in the day. Julia was tired, the energy on set was fading, and director Gere wanted one more spark of magic. So he whispered to Gere, "Do something to wake her up." When she leaned forward to touch the necklace, Gere suddenly snapped the box shut. Julia screamed and laughed for real. That's her honest, caught-off-guard reaction. No script, just pure. Everyone on set cracked up. Marshall instantly yelled, "Cut! That's the one!" And he was right. That spontaneous laugh captured exactly what the movie needed. A flash of genuine chemistry in the middle of all the polish and fantasy. Fact 5. The off-screen romance rumors that nearly blew up the set. Behind those sparkling smiles and gentle touches, things on set were complicated. Word started spreading that Julia Roberts and Richard Gere were too close, that the chemistry on screen might have slipped off screen too. Tabloids circled like sharks. Every look, every touch, every joke between them was suddenly evidence. Even Gary Marshall had to step in and cool things down. The rumors became such a distraction that production meetings turned into gossip control sessions. No one ever confirmed anything. Maybe nothing ever happened. But the tension it created was real, so real that people on set started acting differently around them. Roberts, who was already under insane pressure, suddenly found herself in the middle of a rumor storm she couldn't control. And Gere? He handled it like Edward Lewis would, calm on the outside, frustrated underneath. But here's the twist. That same energy made their scenes sizzle. Fact 6. Richard Gere's secret belief changed the entire movie. Most people don't know this, but Richard Gere wasn't just playing a rich businessman. He was building Edward Lewis through something deeply personal, his Buddhist faith. Gere was already practicing Buddhism long before Pretty Woman started filming, and he quietly wove that spirituality into the character. While everyone saw Edward as this polished Wall Street shark, Gere saw him as a man trapped by emptiness. He kept asking the director, why does Edward need to buy people's time? What is he really searching for? That's not a line from the script. That's Gere dissecting Edward's soul. He even asked for moments of silence in the movie, pauses where Edward reflects, not speaks. Watch closely. The elevator scenes, the hotel balcony, the quiet stares at Vivian, those weren't just romantic beats. They were Gere's idea of meditation in motion. He turned a typical 80s yuppie into a man searching for enlightenment without even realizing it. That's why the romance feels deeper than money or attraction. Fact 7. Jason Alexander's darkest role. You know Jason Alexander, the goofy George Costanza from Seinfeld. But in Pretty Woman, he wasn't funny. He was terrifying. When audiences saw him as Philip Stuckey, Edward's sleazy, aggressive lawyer, they couldn't believe it was the same guy who'd later make them laugh on TV. But on set, even the crew felt uncomfortable watching him work. He threw himself into that role completely, making Philip's cruelty feel disturbingly real. He didn't play him like a villain from a script. He played him like someone you might actually meet, a man who hides behind charm until the mask cracks. That's what made the scene where he attacks Vivian so hard to watch. Julia Roberts later admitted it shook her emotionally, even though she knew it was just acting. And here's the part no one talks about. The backlash. After the film, some fans couldn't separate Jason from Philip. People would literally hiss at him in public. He once joked, "I made America hate me before Seinfeld made them laugh again." That's how powerful that performance was. Fact 8. The polo match full of millionaires who didn't know they were in the movie. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Remember those fancy polo scenes? They weren't staged. Those weren't extras pretending to be rich. Those were actual millionaires. Director Gary Marshall wanted authenticity, so instead of building a fake polo field, he crashed a real high society event in Los Angeles. The crew showed up disguised as guests, set up hidden cameras, and filmed right in the middle of it. Half the people there had no idea they were being filmed for Pretty Woman. They were just sipping champagne, gossiping, and showing off their designer clothes. Meanwhile, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere were acting their hearts out. That's why those scenes feel so alive. The laughter, the arrogance, the whispers, all real. And that sequence didn't just look expensive, it was expensive, in every sense of the word. Fact 9. The shopping scene that changed pop culture forever. That moment when Vivian walks back into the boutique and drops that killer line, "Big mistake." Huge. Might be the most satisfying comeback in movie history. But what most people don't realize is how deep that scene actually goes. That wasn't just about clothes, it was about humiliation, classism, and revenge. Gary Marshall built that sequence to mirror what he'd seen in real Beverly Hills stores, how salespeople treated people based on appearance. Julia channeled every outsider's fury in that moment. Behind the scenes, it was filmed over multiple days because Gary wanted it perfect. He told Julia, "Don't play it angry. Play it victorious." That's why it works? Vivian doesn't scream, she smiles. She's teaching them a lesson. And guess what? That scene literally changed real-world behavior. After the movie came out, high-end boutiques on Rodeo Drive reported floods of women coming in asking for the pretty woman experience. Some stores even trained their staff differently because of that one line. Fact 10. The hotel snobbery was 100% real. Remember the scenes at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel? The cold stares, the judgment, the subtle digs at Vivian? None of that was exaggerated. Gary Marshall didn't invent it. He lived it. Before Pretty Woman, Gary had spent years observing how luxury hotels in LA treated people who didn't look rich enough. He once said he saw women turned away simply because of how they were dressed. That's why he made sure those hotel scenes hit so hard, because they were based on the truth. Even the hotel manager, played by the amazing Hector Elizondo, was written as a quiet rebellion against that culture. When Julia shot those early hotel scenes, she felt that discomfort for real. The extras playing the snobby staff were told to ignore her completely between takes. She later said it helped her understand Vivian's humiliation. "You could feel it in the air," she said. So when Edward finally demands she be treated with respect, it's not just part of the plot. It's Gary's revenge on every snob who ever made someone feel small. Fact 11. The red dress that almost didn't exist. That red dress, you know the one, is practically its own character. The moment Vivian steps out in it, the whole movie changes. But here's the shocker. That dress almost never happened. The original gown wasn't red at all. Costume designer Marilyn Vance had picked a black dress, sleek but lifeless. When they tested it under the lights, it looked dull, flat, and worst of all, it drained Julia's face completely. Gary Marshall hated it. The studio panicked. They had days to fix it. Vance went back to the costume room, grabbed bolts of fabric, and started over. She took a massive gamble on a deep red silk gown that screamed passion, danger, and transformation. When Julia tried it on, everything clicked. Gary walked into the fitting room, saw her in that dress, and said, "That's it." That's the movie that gown turned Vivian from girl for hire into a modern-day Cinderella. Bold, powerful, unforgettable. Fact 12. Julia Roberts' tears at the opera weren't acting. When Vivian sits in that opera house, eyes wide, tears slipping down her cheeks, you'd swear Julia Roberts was giving the performance of her life. But she wasn't acting. Those tears were real. Gary Marshall filmed that scene differently than anything else in the movie. He didn't tell Julia exactly what to expect. The music, the lights, the performance, all of it hit her for the first time right there on camera. Julia had never seen a live opera before, and when the soprano's voice filled the theater, something broke open inside her. The reaction you see, the trembling lip, the wide-eyed awe, was genuine. It was everything Vivian had been through. Humiliation, fear, transformation, hitting her all at once. Julia felt that, too. Gary later said, That wasn't Vivian crying. That was Julia, finally letting go. That's the power of truth in the middle of fantasy. It sneaks up and destroys you in the most beautiful way. Fact 13. Pretty Woman turned Los Angeles into a real-life fairy tale. After the movie came out, people didn't just watch it. They wanted to live it. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel got flooded with calls from women around the world asking for the Pretty Woman suite. They wanted the bath full of bubbles, the champagne, the roses, even the view. The hotel eventually turned it into an actual package at $15,000 a night, and people paid it. Rodeo Drive became a pilgrimage site. Tourists from Europe, Asia, and Latin America came to shop, take photos, and live out their Vivian fantasy. Some boutiques even hired Pretty Woman specialists to help guests recreate her makeover montage. It got so big that local guides started offering Pretty Woman tours, real ones, where fans could ride limos, shop, and walk where Julia walked. Think about that for a second. A movie about class difference literally reshaped one of the richest cities in America. That sounded like it was just in Hollywood, right? Fact 14. Disney shot multiple endings, and some were heartbreakingly dark. You might think Pretty Woman always had that fairy tale ending. Edward in the limo, climbing the fire escape. She rescues him right back. Nope. Disney actually filmed several endings, and not all of them had happy music playing. Some test audiences saw Edward simply drive away, leaving Vivian alone to start her new life. Another version had them parting peacefully. No limo, no kiss. Just closure. The darkest one mirrored the original 3000 ending. Vivian back on the street, staring at her money. That version made audiences so uncomfortable that people reportedly cried in silence when the lights came on. Disney panicked. They wanted magic, not misery. So they tested everything again and again, until they found the perfect balance of fantasy and hope. The result was the ending we all know. Cheesy, over the top, but absolutely unforgettable. When Edward says, "What happens after he climbs up and rescues her?" and Vivian answers, "She rescues him right back." That wasn't just a line. It was Disney's final rewrite, turning a tragedy into salvation. So after hearing all of this, do you still see Pretty Woman as a fairy tale? Or a cover-up for something much darker? Tell me what shocked you the most in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more untold Hollywood secrets.